What if I told you that the books you love, the movies you watch, and even the way you think about heroes and villains, all owe a huge debt to a quirky, middle-aged man who thought windmills were giants? On this day, January 16, 1605, a book was published in Madrid that would change literature forever. That book was the ingenious gentleman Don Quixote of La Mancha by Miguel de Cervantes. Now, you might have heard of Don Quixote. He's the guy in the rusty armor, riding his scrawny horse Rocinante, with his loyal, down-to-earth squire, Sancho Panza, by his side. But why is this story, written over 400 years ago, so incredibly important? Why do we call it the first modern novel? To understand that, we need to travel back to 17th century Spain. The most popular stories of the day were chivalric romances. Think of them as the superhero blockbusters of their time. They were filled with perfect, impossibly brave knights who slayed dragons, rescued princesses from enchanted castles, and always won the day. These stories were pure fantasy, a form of escapism for people living in a tough world. And then, along comes Cervantes. Miguel de Cervantes was a man who had lived a life more dramatic than any fictional knight. He was a soldier, wounded in the great naval battle of Lepanto, where he lost the use of his left hand. He was captured by pirates and spent 5 years as a slave in Algiers before being ransomed. He worked as a tax collector and was even thrown in jail a couple of times. He knew hardship, he knew human folly, and he knew that life wasn't a simple fairy tale. So, when he sat down to write, he decided to do something completely different. He created a character, Alonso Quijano, a gentleman from a region of Spain called La Mancha. This man has read so many of these chivalric romance novels that his brain has, in his own words, dried up. He loses his grip on reality and decides to become a knight-errant himself, renaming himself Don Quixote. This is where the genius begins. Cervantes isn't just making fun of a silly old man. He's using Don Quixote's delusions to explore the massive gap between our ideals and the messy, complicated truth of the world. Don Quixote sees a world of epic adventure and noble quests. He sees an ordinary inn and believes it's a castle. He sees a peasant girl and declares her his noble lady, Dulcinea del Toboso. And most famously, he sees a field of windmills and is convinced they are ferocious giants he must battle. His companion, Sancho Panza, is the complete opposite. He's a simple farmer, motivated by a promise of food and the hope of one day governing his own island. Sancho sees the world for what it is. He sees windmills, not giants. He sees an inn, not a castle. He is the voice of reason, the embodiment of reality, constantly trying to pull Don Quixote back down to earth. The dynamic between these two is what makes the book revolutionary. For the first time, you have complex, psychologically deep characters. They aren't just good or evil. Don Quixote is both a fool and a noble idealist. His intentions are pure. He wants to right wrongs and help the downtrodden, but his methods are completely insane. Sancho Panza is pragmatic and a bit greedy, but he's also fiercely loyal and develops a genuine affection for his mad master. They talk a lot. Their conversations are funny, they're philosophical, and they feel real. This was a massive shift. For Don Quixote, characters and stories didn't really change or grow. They were static archetypes. But throughout their adventures, Don Quixote and Sancho Panza influence each other. The idealistic knight becomes a little more grounded, and the practical squire starts to see a little bit of the magic in his master's worldview. This internal character development is the very soul of the modern novel. Don Quixote was an instant blockbuster. People couldn't get enough of it. It was funny, it was tragic, and it was relatable. Everyone knew someone who was a bit of a dreamer like Quixote, or a pragmatist like Sancho. The book was so popular that an unauthorized fake sequel was published by an anonymous author. This infuriated Cervantes, and it prompted him to write his own part 2, which came out 10 years later in 1615. And the second part is, in many ways, even more brilliant and modern. In part 2, Don Quixote and Sancho Panza discover that a book has been written about their adventures from part 1. They are now celebrities. People recognize them, and some even play along with Don Quixote's fantasies just for their own amusement. This creates an incredible Hall of Mirrors effect. The characters are now aware that they are characters in a story. This is what we call metafiction, And Cervantes was doing it centuries before it became a trendy literary device. He's playing with the line between fiction and reality. Are Don Quixote and Sancho the real ones? Or are the characters in the book about them the real ones? It's a mind-bending concept that questions the very nature of storytelling and identity. Ultimately, the story ends on a deeply moving note. On his deathbed, Don Quixote's sanity returns. He renounces all the follies of knight-errantry and dies as Alonso Quijano once more. It's a heartbreaking moment, a final, poignant clash between illusion and reality. We are left to wonder, was it better to live as a sane man in a dull world, or as a madman in a world full of enchantment, even if it was all in his head? Cervantes didn't just write a funny story about a crazy old man. He created a new way of looking at the world and a new way of telling stories about it. He showed us that characters could be flawed, contradictory, and deeply human. He blended comedy and tragedy, high-minded philosophy with slapstick humor. He invented the road trip story, the buddy comedy, and the idea of a character's internal journey being just as important as their external one. The influence of Don Quixote is staggering. Its DNA can be found in countless works of literature, from Moby Dick to Huckleberry Finn. The term quixotic has entered our language to describe someone who is impractically idealistic. The image of the tall, skinny knight and the short, stout squire is one of the most recognizable literary pairings in history. So on this day, January 16th, let's remember the moment that a book about a delusional Spanish gentleman was unleashed upon the world. It was the day the novel, as we know it, was born. Miguel de Cervantes, through his own life of hardship and his boundless imagination, gave us a story that reminds us to dream, to question reality, and to appreciate the beautiful, funny, and tragic madness of being human. Next time you see a windmill, maybe give it a second look. You never know. It might just be a giant waiting for its next battle. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey into literary history, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories from the past. See you next time.